IShowSpeed is the most chaotic streamer in the world, but sometimes the chaos in his live streams gets too much even for him. And ever since the time Speed broke his ankle and was harassed by fans in Norway, he's been way more careful with how he plans his streams. From finding multiple exits to escape crazy fans, to avoiding places that might get too crowded. Speed can only do this with the help of locals, the people who know the city inside and out. And for every tour guide loved by the chat for sharing their culture, there's one who got hated for making it all about themselves. Starting off with the most famous tour guide anyone can ask for. Because when Speed decided to visit the country of Monaco, his tour guide for this beautiful place was none other than the French football megastar Paul Pogba. But before they could even explore the city, Pogba revealed something unexpected. Speed had already spent hours trying to fix his setup, and even when the stream finally went live, it was still a mess. The internet kept cutting out, the sound kept glitching, and the frustration only got worse. Even with everything going wrong, Pogba gave Speed a reason to smile by saying he plans to return for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. After that, Pogba took Speed to grab ice cream from one of Monaco's most well-known spots, where Speed picked the bubblegum flavor, took a bite, and was somehow surprised it actually tasted like bubblegum, leaving Pogba really confused.
Yeah, duh, it's bubblegum. What did you expect?
Right after, Speed spotted a Louis Vuitton store and decided to make a quick stop. And that's when Pogba reminded Speed how he beat him in FIFA back in 2024 and Speed still owed him a gift. When Speed asked what he wanted, Pogba kept it simple and said he'd just take a perfume because he didn't want Speed spending too much. After that, Pogba showed Speed a secret handshake and they stopped to take a photo with fans. But as they made their way to the exit, Speed's smile completely disappeared because the entrance of the store had been completely taken over by fans. The crowd wasn't just loud anymore, it was beginning to feel overwhelming. Thankfully, with the help of Henry and Rudiger, Speed managed to slip out, but the chaos didn't stop there. As Speed made his way through the crowd, fans wouldn't stop shouting Messi's name, and after all the issues with his stream, you could tell that Speed was starting to lose it.
Yes, yes, yes! What the hell did you just say?
That's when Pogba stepped in and asked the fans to calm down. He spoke to them in French, reminding everyone there were kids in the crowd and the last thing he wanted was for someone to get hurt. And out of respect for the football legend, the crowd completely backed off. Speed couldn't believe it, because he knew if he ever tried that, the fans would have gone more crazy. While Pogba gave Speed a real Monaco experience, the next tour guide seemed more interested in just getting gifts from Speed. Because when Speed reached Switzerland, he probably imagined visiting the stunning Alps and trying every kind of chocolate he could find. But instead, he had a really awkward meetup with his host Alicia Lehmann. Alicia plays for the Swiss national team and has over 16 million followers on Instagram, so Speed was genuinely excited to meet her. But that excitement didn't last long, because the first thing Alicia did was make fun of his height, right in front of everyone.
Hey, do you know what I think?
What?
You're really small.
And to make things even more weird, Alicia laughed at Speed's breakup with Amy and said he'd never get someone like her again.
I think you've done a mistake. You will never find a girl like this anymore.
At that point, Speed was clearly uncomfortable. But the stream wasn't even halfway over, and when they stepped into a Swiss watch store, Speed wanted to get himself a Rolex to remember his trip. But before he could even try anything on, Alicia pointed at the Rolex and teased that Speed should buy it for her. And for a second, Speed actually reached for his wallet, until he saw chat going wild, spamming L after L, begging him not to do it. And that was enough for him to change his mind. From that point on, Alicia wasn't as friendly anymore, and even her smile disappeared. But just when Speed thought things couldn't get any worse, his chat told him something that left him completely stunned, because Alicia had unfollowed Speed on Instagram while they were still hanging out. So when Speed asked her about it, Alicia just shrugged and said she had no idea what Speed was talking about. On top of that, she said that they were never that close anyway, so maybe following him was a mistake from the start. However, that doesn't really add up, because just an hour ago, Alicia was sweet-talking Speed into buying her a Rolex, and now she's acting like they were never even close. But luckily for Speed, not every tour guide was like Alicia, because the next guide made it his mission to give Speed the best experience possible. It was Speed's third time in Poland, and his tour guide was a famous Polish YouTuber, Wojtek Gola, who had some special plans for him. To start things off, Gola set up something no one expected, because Speed would be doing his very first tattoo. And not just on anyone, on, but on Kacper Błąski, one of Poland's biggest singers. And Speed gave him a CR7C tattoo, but accidentally inked it right over Kacper's old tattoo.
What the fuck? My shadow on the other tattoo!
What you mean?
But instead of getting upset, Kacper just laughed it off and hit the Sui with Speed. After that, Gola set up a magic show for Speed. But this wasn't like anything he'd seen before, because when the magician handed Speed 2 red balls and asked him to think of something nice, Speed didn't think that the magician would expose him live on stream. Right after that, a local strongman showed Speed how to deadlift a car that weighed over 1,000 kilos. But that wasn't all, because Gola had a prank planned for Speed. He blindfolded Speed and took him to a bungee jumping spot, where they told Speed they were 90 meters high, but in reality they were barely off the ground. Speed was already scared, but when they told him they were about to push him, he started freaking out and grabbing onto anything he could. But when they actually pushed him and he hit the ground almost instantly, Speed realized it was all a prank and he did not find it funny. In the end, Speed ended up doing the bungee jumping and said he did it because he loves Poland. But the stream was far from over, because Gola had one more surprise, a special edition Polish water bottle just for Speed.
Is this the ultimate most niggas edition?
To wrap it all up, Gola took Speed to the scariest amusement park in Poland, where Slips proved why he is the GOAT by capturing every wild reaction. While Gola stayed in the background just trying to give Speed the best of Poland, the next tour guides failed to show the spirit of their country, because when Speed touched down in Hong Kong, it felt like nobody was ready for him. The Hong Kong government spends millions trying to attract Hollywood stars to promote the city, but when one of the biggest creators in the world shows up on his own, they make no effort to make his trip special. Speed's guides in Hong Kong were local YouTubers Tor Spit and Bertram Lau, who made the whole stream feel more like a self-promo. Things started off smoothly with them taking Speed to feed penguins at Ocean Park, but that tour continued for over 2 hours. But once they left the park, things started to go downhill real quick. Speed might as well have toured alone, because the guides were always on their phones and didn't even bother sharing things about the local culture. For the majority of the stream, Speed was just stuck in his car, surrounded by fans outside his window. But things only got worse, because out of nowhere, one of the guides took a long detour without saying a word, just to bring Speed to his own family's restaurant. And this wasn't some hidden gem known for its classic Hong Kong dishes like milk, tea or dim sum. This place barely had a rating of 3.2 on Google, and no one even told Speed that it was owned by the tour guide's family. And that's when it became clear that this trip wasn't about Speed anymore. It was about the guides. The guides also made Speed ride the MTR, Hong Kong's packed subway system, where he nearly got stuck in a sea of people. Fans online kept complaining about how the guides were totally useless, showing none of the things that make Hong Kong truly iconic, not even the iconic skyline or vibrant nightlife. While Hong Kong's host left fans disappointed, the next guide gave Speed an experience that he will remember forever. When Speed landed in Peru, he planned to explore the local food, greet fans, and even meet up with the national football team. But the second he went live, stream snipers made it nearly impossible to move from one location to another without something going wrong. And in the middle of all that chaos, Peruvian streamer Andy Marino, also known as Elysian, wasn't just another tour guide, he became Speed's shield. Speed couldn't go 5 steps without a Peruvian fan handing him a present, but Andy made sure that madness didn't slow them down. However, when Speed's plan to meet with the Peru's national football team got cancelled out of nowhere, it felt like the whole trip was falling apart. And just when it felt like Peru would turn into a big disappointment, something happened that no one saw coming. Because when Speed visited the mayor of Lima at the government palace, he thought it would be just another formal stop on the tour. But the mayor had other plans, as he welcomed Speed like a national hero and made him sign an official document making Speed the mayor of Lima for 1 hour. Moments later, Speed stepped out onto the palace balcony to a roaring crowd ready to cheer for their brand new mayor. So Speed gave the fans exactly what they wanted and became the first mayor of Lima to backflip off the balcony. While Peru made Speed feel like he was right at home, the next tour guide kept disrespecting Speed every chance he got. While streaming in Beijing, Speed met fashion influencer Miles Moretti, who ended up tagging along for the day. Although Miles brought a beautiful outfit for Speed, his comments all day felt way too rude. He wouldn't stop joking about Speed's shirt, clearly making Speed uncomfortable. But things got worse at the barbershop, because when the barber seemed unsure how to style Speed's dreadlocks? Instead of simply translating that, Moretti told Speed the barber called his hair raggedy.
Are you trolling or are you actually saying
I'm not
that?
trolling, saying it's raggedy.
He didn't say that.
That upset a lot of people, because the barber never said anything rude. He was just confused about how to cut Speed's hair. Later on, Moretti made fun of Speed's push-ups, and by this point, it was clear Speed was starting to lose patience.
It's not even a full push-up.
Yes, it is,
it's
bro.
not. You doing it?
I hate people like this, bro.
And to make matters worse, he even took a jab at Slips.
Velocity with the cart that you're inside of.
You're not Albert Einstein.
Velocity and the current.
Right.
And while it felt like banter at first, a lot of viewers felt like Moretti acted more like the main character than a guide, and made the locals look bad with his translations. But while Moretti was always in front of the camera, the next host barely showed up on the stream and still made Speed feel like the most important person in the country. In Mongolia, Speed was bided by Ergen and Bayer Jargel, a former advisor to the tourism minister, who didn't just show Speed around, but made him feel the depth and pride of Mongolian heritage. After visiting the statue of Genghis Khan, Speed went to a local food festival, where he got to enjoy traditional dishes with the locals. Jargel had planned everything to perfection, even making sure Speed got to experience an authentic Mongolian dance performance. Speed got to hear Mongolian throat singing, and if that wasn't cool enough, he also got to listen to One Piece's opening music played on a traditional Mongolian instrument. And to end the stream, Speed got to become an actual Mongolian warrior and try the food they used to eat before battles. Jargel was barely on camera, but his impact was felt by millions who finally got to see a side of Mongolia they'd never seen before. However, the next tour guide kept trying to get on camera more than Speed. When Speed landed in Bosnia, his tour guide asked him to come to a small city square, but the moment Speed arrived, the square was already packed with screaming fans, bringing back those wild memories from Norway. Speed had to rush back to the car, and that's when he really started questioning if this guide knew what he was doing. And when Speed was venting about the crowd, the guide just kept cutting him off while shouting Bosnia #1. Whenever Speed tried asking his guide where they were headed, his only answer was "trust me," and even Henry got annoyed and reminded him how that same "trust me" almost got them stuck in the main city. The guys took a big detour to take Speed to a hilltop horse farm that belongs to one of his friends, where Speed ended up taking pictures with his entire family, slowing the entire stream down. On the way back down from the hill, they got stuck in traffic and fans started swarming Speed again. While they were in the car, the guide kept singing traditional music, clearly trying to grab all the attention, while Speed showed clear signs of irritation. But things were about to get even more awkward, because the guy started making weird jokes about how Speed should marry his mom and become his stepfather.
Like my mom.
You've never seen your mom though.
Yeah. That stepfather.
The Bosnian guide went down as the most hated in Speed stream history, but the next guy became a fan favorite without ever being hired. When Speed decided to livestream in Chengdu, he had no idea that one of the most wholesome moments of his China tour was about to begin, because while Speed was trying to talk to his chat, a small man pushed through the crowd, giving Speed a full cooked goose. Speed found his new favorite uncle in China, and from that moment on, Uncle kept following Speed through 4 different cities.
How do you keep following me, bro?
At first, Chet thought Uncle was just another cloud chaser, but soon it became obvious. Uncle wasn't there for fame, he just wanted to show the snacks of his hometown, and not just for Speed, but for everyone. Henry, Rudiger, Slips, and even the translators. Uncle made sure all of them tried the local drinks and food. And that's when Speed finally asked the big question from his chat. Should he invite Uncle to travel alongside him? And without hesitation, Chet said yes. And that started the beautiful journey of Speed and Uncle, with Speed teaching Uncle English, to Uncle showing Chinese rap to Speed. Even when they went out for ice cream, Uncle paid for everyone without even being asked.
Uncle paid.
Uncle paid?
What?
You paid? No.
And on Speed's final stream in China, when it was finally time to say goodbye, Speed was really emotional as he didn't want to leave his uncle alone. So he made him a promise that one day he will bring Uncle to the USA.
I met you on the way, on a journey. I gotta bring you to America.